All right, so UFC 282 went down on Saturday night, and looking back at the year, I don't know if there's been a pay-per-view event put on by the UFC that I've been more underwhelmed with than I was in the lead up to UFC 282. Now, the ironic thing is, I don't know if there's been a pay-per-view event this year that has provided as many talking points as UFC 282 has. When I look back at this event, I like to refer to it as the good, the baddie, and the ugly. So let's get into it. Before I do, my name is Rahul J Cham. This is the Battle Camp. Thank you very much for joining me. If you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing. So look, I'm not going to talk about the good, the baddie, and the ugly in that order. What I want to do is talk about things in what I deem to be in the order of importance to the UFC and the sport at large. And I believe the most important thing is the ugly. And in this instance, the ugly is me referring to the main event, Jan Blachowicz against Magomed Ankalaev. Now, I'm not referring to the physical appearances of these two men. I'm talking about this whole fight in general. I'm not even talking about the way they performed in the fight itself. I'm talking about the inception of this fight from the moment Yuri Prochazka pulled out with that shoulder injury, which for some reason is just that the worst shoulder injury in the history of the UFC. I don't know how they measure this, but it is apparently the worst shoulder injury that they've ever seen. Right? So as soon as Prochazka pulls out, we all know the chain of events that happened after he had to pull out. He vacates the title. Glover Teixeira still seems to be in the main event for UFC 282. They're scrambling. They ask him to fight Ankalaev. He says no. He says, I'll fight Blachowicz because I've previously fought him. I need some more time to train for Ankalaev. I haven't been training for a fighter like Ankalaev. The UFC say no. They cut him out of the title picture. They say to Jan Blachowicz and Ankalaev, you guys are fighting on this card anyway. It kind of was an informal #1 contender fight. We're going to elevate this fight to a 5-round main event. And I tell you what, the winner gets to carry around the belt for a bit. They both obviously gladly accepted this offer from the UFC. They went into the octagon. They tried their best. Like, look, I wasn't very entertained. I wasn't very excited by the fight. But one thing that I can say is that both of these men fought their heart out. Yes, there were moments where there was a bit of a stalemate. They both cancelled each other out. They both spent time figuring each other out. There was adjustments that Ankalaev had to make with the low kicks that Blachowicz was having success with in the end of the first and through the second and third round. Ankalaev made the adjustments that he needed to make. And to me, for the record, I believe did enough to win the fight. Now, the fight itself was very close, and we had 3 judges that handed in 3 differing opinions with the scorecards, because one thought Blachowicz won, one thought Ankalaev won, and one thought it was a draw. So we got a majority draw decision. I don't even know what the right way of saying that is, but that's what happened, right? I have no problem with that. I have no issue with that. The UFC put these men in that position, and they put on a fight that the UFC didn't think wasn't good enough in terms of the quality that these men were producing, in terms of the technical ability that they displayed. The UFC were upset with both of these men because they didn't feel as though these men entertained them enough. Do you understand how crazy that is to me? Do you understand how I can't understand, or I can't reconcile, right? The goal of all of these fighters on the card, these 800 fighters that are fighting for the UFC, the goal for each and every one of them is to one day become champion, right? Whether they believe they can do it or not, if you say to them, do you want to be champ? They'll, all 800 of them will say yes, right? That is the holy grail of a mixed martial artist. I don't care what organization you're fighting in. You want to be the UFC champion, right? Being the champion, to me, has some value as a fan watching. And for the way they played musical chairs in the lead up to this fight, to get 2 people to sit in 2 chairs to say, yep, we're fighting for the title, irrespective of whether it's easy to justify them being put in this position, the reaction to the fight, it kind of made me like, it just kind of left a really, really bad taste in my mouth. The way Dana White spoke about both of these guys, and the way that they just just randomly, arbitrarily, however you say that word, decided, oh, actually, no. Even though a lot of people believe that Ankalaev did enough to win that fight and he didn't get the nod by the judges, we're gonna put Jamahal Hill. Is his name just Jamal? And I just call him Jamahal for no reason. I'm just gonna call him Hill. We're gonna give Hill a title shot out of nowhere, like an RKO. Like, how has he managed to maneuver himself in this position? And guess what? Teixeira's back in the picture. Why? Because the next event is in Brazil. The guy that we just X'd out a couple of weeks ago, he's back. And they made it straight after this main event ended. Now, I don't know whether Ankalaev's removal from this position as being one of the competitors in the next vacant title shot had anything to do with what he said to Joe Rogan in the post-fight interview, where he spoke about how he's not sure if he wants to fight for the UFC again because of how the decision went by the judges. He was clearly very emotional. He had just had a 5-round fight, and I feel like he deserves to be cut some slack for some of the comments that he made after that fight. But just the way that this title belts have become an accessory, a prop, it just removes the importance for these titles. Like, for me as a fan of the sport, there's always been 3 divisions that have provided the most memorable moments for me personally, and those are the light heavyweight division, the welterweight division, and the lightweight division. To me, this belt is one of the most important belts that the UFC have, and the way it's been treated ever since Yuri Prochazka got injured, it just devalues the whole. It just devalues the organization. It's almost like how to me winning a title should be down to merit. There should be an order of merit in terms of how you get to a position to challenge for the title, and then when you challenge for the title, eventually when you win it, it should just be clear as day. This is the best guy. This is the best girl. They're the champ. And the way that this belt is being maneuvered around to support commercial endeavors of the UFC, it just makes it feel less important. Like Jamahal Hill, I said his name wrong again. Jamal Hill fighting for a belt. Like, I've got nothing against the geezer, but has he done enough to earn this position that he's now in? He's just a right guy at the right time. And then, not to mention the fact that Anthony Smith was sat there doing analysis for the UFC, and he finds out on air that his opponent that he was supposed to be fighting in March, he's just been conveniently taken away and given a title shot against Glover Teixeira. It's just like the Wild Wild West. No Will Smith. But like, Hill last fought in August and he beat Thiago Santos. Santos, the guy that was on a long losing streak. He beat Johnny Walker prior to that, a guy that was on a long losing streak. And he beat Jimmy Crute prior to that. Jimmy Crute was a guy that obviously had a bit of momentum going into that fight. He was a bit of a prospect. But that got taken away from him when he lost to Serkinov. He had just lost to Anthony Smith prior to his loss to Hill. Do you know what I mean? So he's hardly kind of put together a run of victories that make you sit up and take notice. He is obviously a very capable fighter, but he's not really in that conversation of... He wasn't in the conversation of being a contender for the belt, So to me, that was extremely, extremely ugly. The baddie, obviously, is self-explanatory. That's Paddy the Baddie Pimlet. Now, look, man, I don't want to spend too much time dwelling on Paddy as a individual, right? I've made videos previously where I've said fair play to the geezer. Like, he's managed to maximize his commercial opportunities to an extent that I didn't think was possible. And that was because I've been aware of this geezer for a number of years. And the way he kind of exploded onto the scene after his first win, just over a year ago, I was just a bit dumbfounded. Like, what do these Americans see in this guy? Like, what is it? Like, I don't see what people are seeing. And then I just put it down to the fact that I'm familiar with him, and a lot of people weren't familiar with him. And then he came on the scene with the hair and the accent and the dance moves, and he did something that the Americans got drawn to. He had a persona that American people liked. Now, I don't dislike Paddy Pimblett. I don't have anything against the geezer, but I've just never really liked him. Do you know what I mean? I've just been indifferent to Paddy Pimblett. Just another British fighter. Like, there's a lot of fighters that have come through the same kind of route that Paddy Pimblett has, that I find that I'm drawn to more than Paddy. Like, Jai Herbert is a guy that I really like, and a lot of people don't know him, right? So it's just a personality thing. But in terms of being a top tier star, to me, you need to have the persona, you need to have a personality, and then you need to have substance. What do I mean by that? You need to have a persona, so when you walk into the room, people sit up and take notice, like Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz. You need to have a personality, because when you say something, you need to be able to say, you need to be able to get people to pay attention when you talk. And that's what Nate Diaz has for me. That's what Conor McGregor has for me. Like, when they open their mouth, I'm sitting up, I'm taking notice, I'm listening, right? And then you need to have substance. You need to say things and then back it up in the octagon. Conor McGregor came into the organisation talking about how he's going to be the 145-pound champ, and then he's going to be the lightweight champ. And you know what? He fucking did it. Oh, I'm trying not to swear so much, and well, look, nearly 12 minutes. But he did it. He did it. Nate Diaz has always talked about being the realist. He's always talked about how he follows his ninja code, and how he has his beliefs and his principles, and he goes in there and he fights, and that reflects in his fighting style. The disconnect for me with Paddy Pimblett is he's got the persona, fine, I can understand why people take notice of the geezer, but when he opens his mouth, he doesn't really ever say anything that I believe in. Because he's a guy that sat there talking about how he's the cash cow, he's going to be the next best thing, he's going to be the champ, and I've not seen him perform to that level yet. And this isn't a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid, he's in his late 20s. Like, he should be at his peak, if not reaching his peak. Physically, he should be at his peak. What should be left now is the experience that he needs to get to that top tier level. And he's here struggling against guys that just aren't ever going to be champions. Again, for the record, I believe he lost this fight against Jared Gordon. And what left a bad taste in my mouth is the way he kind of reacted after the loss. You know, he literally had a shocker of a week, in my opinion. And I'm not even just referring to the Ariel Helwani stuff. It was like just the attitude going into this fight, that I need to finish him in one round. I heard him say that in the pre-fight kind of press thing. I need to finish this guy in one round to prove that I am capable of being champion in the future. And he comes out in the post-fight press conference and he's talking about how he took the third round off because he was so confident that he'd won the first two. That don't add up to me. Like, if you're so confident that you're winning, then surely you want to put an exclamation mark on your performance and get that finish. To me, what I believe the truth is he physically couldn't do anything different. Jared Gordon was in control of that fight, and Pimblett had run out of ideas. The deficiencies in his stand-up don't seem to be going away, and he's not really fighting any top-tier strikers. What he says outside the octagon, the moral of the story is, what he says outside the octagon, it doesn't correlate with what he does inside the octagon. And for me, that's a massive, massive problem. Now, I've seen videos of Joe Rogan's expression in the octagon as the decision got read out. I've seen a video of Dana White's reaction when he's standing next to that barstool guy when the decision gets read out. Like, a lot of people believe, it's not even just about Joe Rogan and Dana White. Literally anyone that knows anything about the sport believes that Jared Gordon won. Now, I'm not one of these guys that believe that this is the worst decision in MMA history, like some people are saying online. like I've heard Ariel Helwani talk about. I believe that this was a close fight. It was a close fight. Both fighters had moments in each round where they had a bit of success. The fact of the matter is, it was a fairly uneventful fight. Not a lot happened. There wasn't a huge amount of damage. There wasn't a huge amount of spiteful shots that really rocked one of the two guys in the fight. But I believe it was. You can still have a close fight, and that is 30-27. And I believe that Jared Gordon did enough to win each of the rounds, even though they were relatively close. So the way Paddy Pimblett reacted, it's so, to me, it's so easy. It's so easy just to say, look, I believe in my heart of hearts, I won this fight. However, I need to watch it back. I need to see exactly what happened. I've just had a 15-minute fight. I can't remember everything that happened every minute of each round. So I need to go back and watch it, but I do feel as though I won the fight. Right? That's all he needs to say in the post-fight press conferences or in the post-fight interview with Joe Rogan. And then nobody's going to bother asking him about it afterwards. But the way he acted and was so adamant and sure that he had won, that's what extends the kind of fallout from it because of his actions. And I don't know whether Paddy Pimblett is self-aware enough of what he's been doing and saying over the last couple of weeks to kind of deter people from A, getting on the bandwagon, and B, keeping people on the Paddy Pimblett bandwagon. And to me, that's a sad state of affairs. Really quickly to finish off, the good, finally, a bit of positive to talk about, because the way Ilia Topuria conducted himself all of last week in his media engagements, the way he was, I feel like he got the better of Paddy Pimblett in the pre-fight press conference, and then the way he went in there and fought, cards on the table. Bryce Mitchell is one of my favorite fighters. He's a guy that has a persona, a personality, and substance. Right, the same thing I was talking about just now, because his persona is very unique, his personality is very unique, and you know what? One of my most watched videos of this year was me sitting here talking about Bryce Mitchell's interview with Ariel Helwani and how I feel like, how I didn't agree with some of the things that he said, right? So a lot of people probably think that I don't like Bryce Mitchell. Well, really, I just didn't agree with some of the things that he said. He's still one of my favorite fighters. I still find him very funny. I still find him very entertaining. And I still think he's one hell of a fighter, as Floyd Mayweather says. And I thought Bryce Mitchell would go in there and beat him. I thought that Bryce Mitchell would be too primal for Topuria. I felt that he would go in there and be able to dig that little bit deeper than Topuria is able to, and drag him into some deep waters and get the finish. How wrong was I? So Topuria kind of lit him up on the feet and finished him with that arm triangle choke in the second round. I was shocked. I was shocked that Bryce Mitchell got submitted. I was surprised by how tired Bryce Mitchell looked in the second round. And I'm not trying to make excuses for Bryce Mitchell, because I believe what Topuria did in the first round had a lot to do with Bryce Mitchell looking the way he did in the second round. I don't know whether Bryce Mitchell was used to being in a fight where literally nothing was going his way. I remember I saw Bryce Mitchell fight, and I can't remember who it was against. It was maybe 3 or 4 fights ago where he was struggling with his opponent on the feet. Was it Andre Fili? Charles Rosa? I can't remember who it was, man. I can't remember who it was against, but it was 3 or 4 fights ago, but he managed to kind of dig deep and get the win. And he couldn't dig because he couldn't get a grip, he couldn't get a handle. He couldn't get a handle on the fight because Ilia Topuria was just too good for him. I have seen that Bryce Mitchell's put out a video since saying that he was suffering from the flu and whatever. So I don't know. I don't know whether that's an excuse. I don't know whether that's the truth. But that's what he's saying. But I don't want to focus on Bryce Mitchell, because Topuria is a guy that, to me, is improving exponentially in front of our eyes. I mentioned Jai Herbert. I mentioned Jai Herbert just kind of a little while ago. And that fight against Jai Herbert, Topuria was hurt. Topuria was hurt, but he came back and he got a vicious KO. And he's been kind of on my radar for a while, especially after the way he beat Ryan Hall, because Ryan Hall obviously is a guy that is known for his BJJ skills, and the way he just kind of negotiated that tricky opponent and didn't get caught, didn't find himself caught in that spider's web that Ryan Hall has once he's on his back with his legs in the air. Pause. But the jump up from Jai Herbert at lightweight to Bryce Mitchell at featherweight in terms of caliber of opponent and title credentials is a big jump, in my opinion. And what he did in that octagon at still being young, 25 years old, there's a big future ahead for this geezer. And I don't think it's a coincidence the way Paddy Pimblett is refusing to talk about Ilia Topuria, keeps calling him a midget. I think Paddy Pimblett is very aware of the quality of fighter that Topuria is, and he wants nothing to do with Topuria. One thing that I finally want to talk about is Darren Till's loss to Dricus du Plessis, because to me, of all of the losses that Darren Till has had in this run, this is the worst, because du Plessis, in my opinion, is a guy that Darren Till should be streets ahead of on the feet. And on the ground, du Plessis basically, from what I kind of, and this is my untrained eye, what I saw was a guy that was just manhandling Darren Till. He wasn't on the ground using technique and position to advance his position on the ground. He was just using brute strength. And to me, that's the lowest level of denominator. I don't know if that's the right word to use in this context, but I'm going to go with it. To me, that's kind of like, that should be like the easiest kind of skill to overcome if you know what you're doing, if you're proficient on the ground. And Darren Till just looked like a fish out of water. And I don't know why. For a guy that's been training with Kamzat for a year and with that whole team, like, he seems to, so like, you know, he was with that, is it Team Kaibon? Is that what they called in Liverpool? He seemed quite grounded there. And then since then, he's been traveling around the world to, you know, get different looks, to train, to add new kind of weapons to his arsenal. And then he goes in the octagon and he seems to be not as good as he previously was. He put out that video after the fight and he kind of alluded to it being a psychological thing, more so than a physical thing. And I don't know, I just feel like he's a little bit lost. And that reflects in his movements from camp to camp, from you know, different training partners to different training partners. And unfortunately I can't see him reaching the heights that he was once at. This was a guy that was once the face of UK MMA. A year and a half later, he's the second fight on a main card where Paddy Pimblett, of all people, is a co-main event. And just that alone must have hurt Darren Till. Looking across that kind of dais and that on the press conference before the fight, and seeing Paddy Pimblett in a position that Darren Till should be in, and him knowing what level Paddy Pimblett operates at when it comes to the actual mixed martial arts of it all. Like, it must be psychologically quite difficult for Darren Till. And I don't know, I just feel as though maybe he just needs to get back to basics and get back with his original team and start again and try not to overtrain, because he always seems to pick up injuries. during training camps. And I don't know whether it's just luck. Some people just are more susceptible to getting injured than others. I don't know whether it is because he overtrains. I don't know whether it's because he blows up between camps and he's working extra hard to not only get into fight shape, but get into shape and not be a fatty. Like, I don't know what it is that needs to happen, but I feel like he's a bit of a nomad at the minute, and perhaps it will do him good just to be around some familiar faces for a while. And let's not get it mistaken, man. Du Plessis isn't a guy that is, in my opinion, capable of winning a title. He's not a top tier middleweight. He's a guy that, if Darren Till is who he says he is, he's a guy that should be getting dispatched off with relative ease. And things just aren't working out for him. Special mention for the Ponzinibbio against Moreno fight. I know Moreno came in at short notice, and what an entertaining scrap that was. To me, that was fight of the night. I don't know what Paddy Pimblett, sorry to keep harping on about this, but I don't know what Paddy Pimblett was thinking when he thought that he was kind of, in the fight of the night. No way. But yeah, these are my thoughts about UFC 282. I do plan on making a video talking about the whole Ariel Helwani Paddy Pimblett beef, but maybe I'll do that tomorrow or something. But for the meanwhile, please put your comments below. Let me know what you thought about the things that I've said in this video. Share your own opinions about my own opinions, and we can have a nice civil conversation in the comment section. If you've enjoyed it, like it, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. I'm getting tired. I'm going to stop recording. Thanks for listening.